What's up, jerks? Want to talk about psychological functions and answer your questions. Basically, I wanted to start with the definition of a function. A function is a psychological activity that you get energy from. That's basically it. It's something, a way you think or a way you collect information that gives you energy, that makes you go, wow, I want to do more of that. Which is why there's preferences, and that's why they're called preferences, because it's physically possible for you to think in that other way, but it doesn't give you energy, which is why you have that preference. The next thing I want to talk about is the different kinds of functions. There are two kinds of functions, observing or perceiving, and judging functions. Now, the perceiving functions, don't confuse that with perceiver versus judger stuff. It's literally just the functions you use to observe the world. And the two perceiving functions are intuition and sensing. The two judging functions are thinking and feeling. And basically, you have to have one of each on each side. You always have one sensing function and one intuition function, and you'll always have one thinking function and one feeling function, without fail. Now, here's where it gets a little complex. There are introverted and extroverted versions of each function. Using the two perceiving and judging function sets, you'll have one introverted version of each and one extroverted version of each. So basically, if you have extroverted sensing, you'll always have introverted intuition. And if you have extroverted intuition, you'll always have introverted sensing. Now with the judging functions, it's the same. If you have introverted thinking, you'll always have extroverted feeling. And if you have introverted feeling, you'll always have extroverted thinking. Now here's another thing where it gets a little complex. People like to talk about shadow functions. And a shadow function is outside of the top four functions that a lot of us refer to. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So you have the INTP. Their functions are TI, introverted thinking, extroverted intuition, introverted sensing, and extroverted feeling. Now, this is the generally accepted four functions that we all have. We all have, basically four like this, or the opposite of that. Now, the shadow functions are the exact reverse, and it looks like this. And so the shadow of the INTP is the ENTJ. And the theory goes that we actually all have all 8 functions inside of us like this. So the INTP would have these 4 functions and then these 4 underneath. Now the problem with that theory is, if you're a dominant introverted thinker, so you're used to referring to the inside of your head for decision making, you're not going to be in the habit of looking outside yourself for that information. Now it's possible, absolutely, but it's not your dominant way of thinking. And if you try to fix yourself, you end up making yourself a poor introverted thinker and a poor extroverted thinker, if that's even what you're doing, which you probably aren't. And so while a lot of authors like to say that we have this shadow function set up, I don't think so. Because even if the functions are there, even if INTPs have extroverted thinking, they don't have enough of it for it to matter. Okay, so just to summarize, there are two kinds of functions, observing and judging functions. The observing functions are intuition and sensing, and then the judging functions are thinking and feeling. We use the observing functions to take everything in from the outside world, absorb it. The kind of observing function you have determines your preference. I'll talk about that later as far as what kind of information you look for. And then the judging function determines your dominant way of making decisions. Since we all have thinking and we all have feeling and we all have intuition and we all have sensing, there's always a secondary way we can be observing or thinking. So really it boils down to preference, and even outside of that preference, like an INTP with the extroverted feeling, they can make decisions with that extroverted feeling. They have it. It's not dominant, but they still have it. And so stop worrying about this shadow function BS. Just work on developing your 4 functions and don't worry about the rest, because honestly, this is about developing your strengths and putting yourself in a position where those strengths work to your favor. Because if a fish is judged by its ability to climb a tree, it's going to grow up thinking it's dumb. See you guys next week. And by the way, leave me a comment. I'd be interested in what you think about this video, as well as your psychological type and what you'd be interested in learning about more in the future. And as always, ask me questions and I'll be happy to answer them.